You look tired, sir,
said the little girl on the plane. The CEO didn't expect that she'd change his life forever. Nathan Hale adjusted the cuff of his navy wool coat as he stepped into the narrow aisle of the packed commercial flight from Seattle to Boston. It was a red-eye, and he hated red-eyes. First class was full, leaving him, much to his quiet annoyance, with a seat in economy. Row 18C, window. He moved past a couple, arguing about overhead bin space, and slipped into his seat, letting out a slow breath as he sank into the fabric. The hum of engines preparing for takeoff filled the cabin, matching the static in his head after a relentless week of boardroom battles and press interviews. Nathan looked every bit the high-powered CEO. Tailored slacks, sleek leather shoes, a watch that cost more than some people's rent, but his face gave him away. The lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the subtle slump of his shoulders. He looked like a man worn thin. He pulled a folded newspaper from the seat pocket, but his eyes skimmed the page without processing a word. His mind was already shutting down. Then came the shuffle of small feet. A little girl, no older than 3, in a bright pink dress and a green turtle-shaped backpack, appeared beside him, her eyes wide with wonder. "That's our seat, Mommy. Look, it has a window." She clambered into the middle seat with the kind of excitement only a child could have about flying, her shoes kicking lightly against the seat in front of her. Nathan offered a polite smile and turned to the window, hoping she would quiet down. Then came the voice, soft, curious. "You look tired, sir." Nathan turned slightly. The girl was looking up at him with big, sincere eyes, her tone not mocking, just concerned. He cleared his throat. "I'm fine," he said flatly. She didn't seem convinced, but she said nothing more, just smiled faintly and settled in, swinging her legs as she dug into her backpack. To his surprise, she didn't fidget or whine. She looked around in quiet fascination, fingers clutching the straps of her bag, which was slightly too big for her small frame. Nathan glanced at her again. She had soft, blonde curls that bounced as she moved, and cheeks round with youth. Her dress was rumpled from travel, but clean. A small stuffed bunny peeked from her backpack's zipper. In the aisle seat, her mother had already fallen asleep, head tilted to the side, wavy blonde hair falling over her shoulder. Her features were soft but exhausted. She looked young, too young for the weariness in her face. Her arms folded over her purse, breathing deep with the kind of sleep born of sheer fatigue. The girl looked at her mother, then back at Nathan. She held out something, half a chocolate chip cookie, wrapped in a napkin. "For you," she said simply. He blinked. "No, thank you," he replied. Her brow furrowed slightly. "You can have it. I have more." Nathan hesitated. Something in her open, unbothered expression made it hard to say no. He took the cookie. "Thank you," he said, quietly. She smiled. Like that one word made her day. He took a bite. Sweet, crumbly. The plane began to taxi. The lights dimmed. Nathan leaned back, closing his eyes. The girl adjusted, leaned her head against the armrest, and hugged her stuffed bunny. Her mother remained asleep, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Nathan opened his eyes once more, glancing at the small figure beside him. A strange warmth settled in his chest, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. For the first time in a long while, someone had looked at him and seen him. Not the suit, not the company. Just a tired man. And that someone was a little girl with a green backpack. The cabin lights dimmed as the flight cruised above the clouds. Nathan sat still, shoulders slightly stiff under the weight of the sleeping child. Sophie's tiny head had found its way to his upper arm after she handed him that half cookie. He had not had the heart to move. Outside, the world had vanished into darkness, pierced only by scattered lights glowing like distant memories. Beside him, the woman in the aisle seat stirred. Her head lifted slowly. She blinked, disoriented, until she realized her daughter was no longer next to her. "Sophie?" she said, upright now, voice hushed but sharp with worry. Nathan gestured for silence, then pointed to the girl asleep against him. "She's okay," he said gently. "She fell asleep a little while ago." The woman, Elena, exhaled deeply. Her shoulders sagged. One hand went to her chest, then reached to touch her daughter's back, just to be sure. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice raspy. "I didn't mean to doze off. I must have been more tired than I thought." Nathan shook his head. "No harm done." She pushed back some tousled blonde hair and gave him an apologetic smile, soft, a little embarrassed. "I just finished 3 overnight shifts. Got off work at 5 this morning, came straight to the airport. Thought I could stay awake." He glanced at her, really looked young, but weary. Eyes lined from sleepless nights, faint circles beneath them. But her voice was warm, and the way she gently rubbed Sophie's back said more than words. "You work in healthcare?" he asked. "Yeah, nurse assistant, technically. Temporary position." He nodded, then looked down at Sophie, who shifted slightly in her sleep, a faint smile on her lips. "She's surprisingly good company," he murmured. Elena chuckled. "That's Sophie. She thinks strangers are just friends we haven't met yet." Nathan smirked, fleeting but real. "I noticed." They sat quietly, the white noise of the cabin settling around them. The space between them felt oddly safe. Not intimate, just human. "She's very thoughtful," he said. "Offered me half a cookie earlier." Elena smiled, a hint of pride. "She does that when she thinks someone needs cheering up. She's observant." Nathan glanced at the crumb still in his hand, then at Sophie. She was right. Elena tilted her head, as if trying to read his tone, but said nothing. "I'm Elena, by the way," she offered, adjusting Sophie's blanket. "Nathan." She nodded. "Thank you for watching her. Not everyone's patient with kids." "She's easier to be around than most adults I know," he said, the corners of his mouth lifting. Elena's expression softened. She looked at Sophie, then back at Nathan. "She sees people, sometimes better than adults do." Nathan looked toward the window. "Maybe that's because she hasn't learned how to look away yet." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Outside, the plane soared above a sea of clouds, the sky vast and black. Nathan closed his eyes, letting the hum of the engines drown his thoughts. But the image of that tiny hand offering him half a cookie wouldn't leave. By the time the plane landed in Boston, the moment had passed. Nathan disembarked, briefcase in hand, purposeful gait returning. No words were exchanged, just a glance back at the tired woman and the sleeping child with the green backpack. But as terminal lights blinked overhead and the crowd swept him away, Nathan couldn't shake the quiet feeling that something inside had shifted. He was not sure what it meant, only that it had been a very long time since he'd felt it. Boston greeted him with drizzle and gray skies. A black car waited at the curb. The driver held an umbrella, but Nathan barely noticed the chill. His mind was elsewhere, still somewhere at 35,000 feet. The quiet kindness of a stranger's child should not have stayed with him. And yet, it had. Back home, he poured himself one drink, like always, and stood by the tall window of his penthouse. The city glittered below, but none of it reached him. It never had. His eyes dropped to a photo frame on a low shelf. Dust clung to the edges. He hadn't touched it in years. Emily. His wife. His best friend. The one who loved him before the success, before the suits. They were married 10 months before a rainy night, a red light, and a phone call that shattered everything. He buried her in the fall. The leaves were red that day. She would have loved that. Since then, life had become efficient. Meetings, mergers, expansion, no distractions. Only responsibility. Especially now, with his mother's health fading, donor lists, blood types, and risk-filled every conversation. He visited, signed forms, asked questions, then went back to work. It was how he survived structured emptiness. But for the first time in 5 years, something had broken the rhythm. And it had started with a girl in a pink dress and a green backpack. The scent of antiseptic hit Nathan the moment he stepped through the sliding glass doors of the hospital. Cold, clean, clinical, just like every visit before. He passed the reception desk with a quiet nod and took the elevator to the 6th floor, where his mother had been admitted for another round of tests. The hepatology wing was quiet, the kind of silence filled with muted beeping monitors and tired footsteps. Nathan had never liked hospitals. They were places of endings, of waiting, of helplessness. He tucked his hands into his coat pockets as he turned a corner toward the nurse's station. He had come to check on donor registration updates, but as he walked down the hall, a familiar voice caught his attention. "Okay, Mr. Donovan, slow and steady. We've got all the time in the world." Nathan glanced toward the sound. A young woman in scrubs, light blue top, white coat loosely tied, was gently helping an elderly man with a walker. She walked beside him, voice calm and patient. It took him half a second to recognize her. The wavy blonde hair, the quiet strength in her voice, the eyes, warm but tired. Elena. He stopped without meaning to. She didn't see him at first. Her focus was on the older man, steadying his grip, adjusting his oxygen line. But then, Sophie appeared from around the corner, waddling toward them with the unmistakable glee of a child who recognized someone important. "Uncle Airplane!" she squealed. Nathan blinked. Sophie ran straight to him and wrapped her arms around his legs with surprising force. Her little pink shoes squeaked on the hospital floor. Nathan crouched slightly, caught between amusement and disbelief. "Hey there," he said, managing a smile. Elena turned quickly at the sound, her eyes widening. She froze for a split second, caught between shock and embarrassment. "You," she breathed, then recovered. "Hi." Nathan stood, nodding politely. "Elena. I didn't expect to see you here," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, clearly flustered. "Are you visiting someone?" "My mother," he replied. "She's being evaluated for a transplant. I come in a few times a week." Elena nodded. "I see." They stood in awkward silence before she motioned to the elderly man. "I should get Mr. Donovan back to his room," she said softly. Nathan stepped aside. "Of course." But Sophie clung to his leg again. "Wait, Mommy, can he come too?" Elena sighed gently. "Honey, he's busy." "It's fine," Nathan said, surprising himself. He walked with them as Elena helped Mr. Donovan back into bed. She was gentle but efficient, and Nathan observed her with quiet curiosity. Once the patient was settled, she turned back to him and Sophie, who was now in a visitor chair playing with the stethoscope dangling from her mother's pocket. "You work here?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Just night shifts, mostly assisting, sometimes mornings if someone calls in sick." "You're not a registered nurse?" Her lips tightened. "Not officially. I was in med school, Harvard." Nathan's brows lifted. "That's impressive." She gave a small, dismissive shrug. I dropped out in my second year. Things got complicated." His eyes flicked to Sophie. Elena followed his gaze and nodded. "Yeah," she said. Her father wasn't part of the plan. Neither was raising a child alone, working 2 jobs or barely scraping by. She didn't sound bitter, just tired, honest. Nathan's voice softened. "That's a lot." "It is what it is," she replied. "I'm not ashamed. But this isn't where I thought I'd be." He looked at her. No pretense, no dramatics, just quiet strength beneath fatigue. Then she said it, almost under her breath. "This is just temporary," she whispered. "I used to dream of being a surgeon." Her eyes flicked up to his, and for a second, Nathan didn't know what to say. He only knew he understood. Dreams left behind. Plans rewritten by loss. He saw her in a new light, not just as Sophie's mother, but as someone who had carried broken dreams with grace, someone who kept going. And something shifted in him again. Maybe fate did not come with grand announcements. Maybe it just walked quietly beside you, in scrubs and sneakers, holding a little girl's hand. The days following their unexpected reunion passed in quiet rhythms. Nathan found himself visiting the hospital more often, not just for updates on his mother's condition, but because something about that hallway, that moment, lingered. Elena never asked for anything. She moved through her shifts with steady focus, on the patients, on Sophie, on keeping everything from falling apart. But Nathan noticed things. The medical textbooks she read during breaks were old and worn. The notes scribbled on napkins and scraps. The way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, after a board meeting, Nathan left a small bag at the nurse's station. Inside were 2 pristine anatomy reference books from his university days, highlighted, bookmarked, like new. No note, no signature. The next morning, she found him waiting outside the coffee stand in the lobby. "You left those, didn't you?" she asked. He shrugged. "They were just sitting on my shelf." She smiled, a quiet, hesitant smile. "Thank you." It became a pattern. Nathan connected her with a retired Harvard professor who had once spoken at a fundraiser, arranged a brief meeting under the pretense of a casual visit. No promises, no pressure. Elena didn't protest, but she never asked for more. Meanwhile, Sophie grew fond of him. She insisted on calling him Uncle Star after Elena told a bedtime story about stars guiding people home. Each evening, without fail, Sophie video called him to say goodnight. Nathan, who once ignored personal calls, now set reminders so he would not miss them. He listened to her sing off-key cartoon songs, watched her show off drawings of Dr. Mommy, and once even wore a crown she made from napkins and tape. Her affection disarmed him. It melted barriers he thought were permanent. Still, Nathan kept his distance. He never reached for Elena's hand, never lingered too long in her gaze, because deep inside, guilt still sat in his chest like a stone. One evening, after a late meeting, Nathan returned to the hospital to drop off insurance forms. The halls were dim and quiet. On his way out, he passed the staff break room and paused. The door was ajar. Inside, Elena sat on a bench, still in scrubs. Her hair was a little messy, shoes kicked off. Sophie lay curled in her lap, fast asleep, pink dress rumpled, green backpack on the floor. Elena hummed softly, rocking slightly, her arms wrapped around her daughter. She looked exhausted, but peaceful in a way Nathan had never seen. He stood there for a long moment, unnoticed. Then, quietly, he stepped in. Without a word, he removed his coat and gently draped it over her shoulders. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "I didn't mean to wake you," he whispered. She blinked, registering him. "I must have." Dozed off. I was waiting for her to settle. He crouched beside them. "I'll sit with her. You rest." She looked at him, tired, surprised, grateful. Then, too weary to resist, she leaned back and closed her eyes. Nathan sat on the floor beside them, legs crossed, arms resting on his knees, watching Sophie's quiet breathing. A few minutes later, a nurse passed the doorway and stopped. She was older,